Are there any other things that you've thought about as like techniques, tactics, whatever, that leaders could be applying to again get that understanding of, hey, this is a good game or it's not?
Yeah, I think the big one that comes to mind is World of Warcraft was built by a bunch of EverQuest nerds. And
Mm-hmm.
um, World of Warcraft, in my opinion, I'm sure that someone might correct me out there, did not have one single thing that made it great. It didn't have that single innovation. That's like if you had pitched World of Warcraft, it's actually not that interesting of a pitch. Be like it's like EverQuest, but a slightly more accessible and skinned in this beloved RTS's world. And before it came out, I think a lot of World of Warcraft people, or like a lot of critics, were basically like, World of Warcraft is going to bomb. It's meaningless. People underestimated how many genre micro innovations that they could sort of build through sheer just grasp of a new space. And I feel a little bit similarly with League of Legends, which is it's not just that there's like an underserved audience, it's that there was enough friction points and sort of little things that sort of in aggregate sort of add up. And that
Yeah.
often when we're sort of talking about what makes these games fun, people underestimate like how many little rough underpolished edges that matter exist in some of the best games. Like one of my favorite examples is for Apex Legends, they built a ping system. And the ping system
Mm-hmm.
was massively well received. It's like, oh my god, you got to check out every game needs one of these now. I consider it like a pretty
Yep.
decent innovation. Like I don't know for certain, but I bet you $10 right now that like that didn't start from like this is how we sort of like make a better battle royale. That sort of um, teams have sort of variable capacity for sort of these improvements, and often they spend all their gas trying to sort of land the singular marketing friendly massive plus one and kind of miss these other opportunities to sort of rack up a bunch of smaller wins that sort of one or two of them might pop off and actually be really meaningful. And that's often because you want a critical mass of sort of passion and literacy of the space. That as much as I appreciate devs being creatively ambitious and trying to like move on to other genres or sort of take jobs in genres that don't really speak to them, like, I mean, I'm not as, you know, militant as Riot was at certain times of sort of how much this matters, but like I was surprised for a while there that Riot was so intense about people that really understood League. And I do feel like when you're trying to build something new in a space, it's easy to sort of like underestimate the value of sort of like the micro improvements, underestimate the value of devs that really care about sort of small things that sort of bother them in their favorite hobby. Like I think it's one of the reasons that World of Warcraft has been on top of its genre for so long is because it was birthed from a place that cared so much about sort of these little quality of life issues and sort of kept iterating and sort of kept getting after them. Like, don't be surprised if you can sort of farm a significant improvement to a genre just by sort of pulling those threads. But that only matters if you're sort of budgeted and structured in such a way to leave room for that. Like, if you scramble, like your devs are not going to be like, hey, remember this minor pain point. And it's often a lot of the like quiet quality of your game is sort of found in those little corners and edges. And it's like getting the team to internalize that they matter and that sort of players care and that sort of we are moving the ball is sometimes hard when you keep sort of pointing at your pillars and your pitch as sort of like the end all be all of razors as to sort of how you compete and sort of how do you get in there. My last little bit on this is like one of the reasons like I have like a bit of a pain point when people use sort of minimum viable product. I like it. It's a valuable term. It's a valuable concept. The thing is, in video games, it's just a hair different because in a lot of ways, the critical difference between like technology products and games is technology problems like products often objectively solve a problem for you and you're happy if it just hits that checkbox. Video games in some ways are closer to like luxury goods And if you buy a luxury car, when you open up that car handle and it feels a little wobbly and it feels a little off, it ruins the spell. It sort of breaks your impression that this is something of quality that was loved. And it's often those micro innovations and those little, being mindful of the smaller areas of sort of friction or quality of life. You'd be surprised how powerful that might be to sort of somebody that sort of spent 10 years in a genre and they've had that sort of rock in their shoe for 10 years and you fix it. That's somebody that's telling their friends that, you're a game that matters, that you have credibility. So it's a difficult cocktail, sort of, prioritizing the sort of the big and the small, but like leaving breathing room to sort of like help the small is a surprising sort of organizational feat, because typically it's every ounce of effort and attention just to get the game shipped with, one or two big things that make it different. If you can find room for those little ones, man, those things can really push. Yeah, I've got more, but that was the one that was top of mind.
No, it's well. Are there any other one? Because I a couple of thoughts came to mind for me, and one of them related to size of team, things like that, and I know we've talked about this before, again, not on the podcast, but that idea of when you're thinking about budgeting, you're thinking about setting yourself up and thinking about your runway, and you're going to run all these prototypes.
Yeah.
The bigger your team is, the more expensive that is.
You're right. I definitely want to talk about this one because I've learned this one a couple different ways. Like, being really conscious of your upstream versus your downstream is so hard and important.
Talk more, define those terms.
So upstream, in my opinion, is the chain in my mind, feel free to disagree with, is business, then game direction, then engineering, then design, then, most of the aesthetic disciplines with animation being on top, test, not last, don't assume last, test appears at sort of odd places in there. And that, if the business doesn't have a portfolio strategy, the game director cannot pitch. If the game director doesn't have a pitch, engineering can't make technology investments to unblock design. Like the chain is really critical. And I think there's a desire, a common desire, to try to do things in parallel, to see, reach a critical mass of team where you have both upstream and downstream devs next to each other so they can better inform each other, so the dependencies can be identified, so better some more, like the dream is better cement can be poured because we have the actual people on staff who are going to be making the actual decisions. And in reality, I've come to believe it's way more practical in most circumstances to keep it small. If you can avoid even hiring designers, if your game director can hire one designer enough to sort of like get engineering the time and space it needs to pour cement, in my opinion, engineering is like does not receive enough time to really do what it needs to do in almost every project I've ever seen. And that
100% agree. 100% agree.
Like engineering will be a trooper and say yes to juggling too many plates, but like you're robbing your long-term, like your like small differences in tech stack quality can make or break your project. They can pay a massive tax on all your content forever. Plus, like your engineers stretch thin between, trying to force multiply other devs while sort of getting their sort of house in order is bad. And a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, like, I think it's going to become more modern to try to supplement your small engineering and design centric team with freelance art, with freelance, spot support of specialists before you hire FTEs to protect your burn. It's not easy, but I think it's a superior model than to eat the FTEs. There's exceptions. Some genres, you need narrative in there early. Some genres, animation will kill you if you do not pull animation in.
If you're making Witcher 4, you probably need to bring narrative in right off the bat.
But I think overhiring engineering and giving them a little bit too much time should be the new baseline. And like if design proves to you that they have a very nice prototyping trajectory, for me, that's the burden to sort of look at your staffing plan. Until you are certain that your design team actually has the momentum you hope they do, it's dubious to basically assume design's going to be able to answer questions sufficiently. There's a real chance that you need to go back to your thesis, go back to your reference, go back to your business partners and sort of have a tough talk because prototyping is not bearing fruit. And if you're overstaffed, you're just gonna like die. You're gonna push your design team to answer
Yeah.
questions to save your bacon instead of doing the right thing and going back to drawing board and thinking critically about what you have. In the meantime, those engineering hires are gonna you're probably going to end up in the same genre, and it's very unlikely that you're going to be rewriting major IP agnostic tech. So it's good investment to get the engineers in there early enough and give them breathing room. I feel like the aesthetic disciplines, like as much as I like having them as partners and how like it's inspiring to have them early, that burn is so scary. It's really like if you start doing math of sort of even a couple extra aesthetic disciplines versus sort of spot freelance support, like if you're utterly confident in your team's ability to prove something in a small time box for some reason, I could see it. But if you're not sure, you're just better off as a leader, sort of assuming that your upstream teams can't sort of deliver ever so predictably that your downstream teams are sort of unblocked from hiring. It's an easy mistake to make. I get it, and it's more inspiring especially when you have your magic art director friend that sort of is the best in the world, and you can't wait to hire them. But like having them blocked or semi-blocked is like they're like, oh, I won't be a bother. Trust me. It's like, dude, it's also the burn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.